This is 55 Tufton Street in London. You may have heard of it, or maybe not. It's not your average address, because from the moment Liz Truss took over as Prime Minister, Britain was, in a sense, being run from this building. It's home to a group of lobbying organisations that for years have pushed an extreme economic ideology, free market fundamentalism. They're hostile to regulations that protect the environment and workers' rights. They think companies owe a duty only to their shareholders and not to society more generally. They don't like the NHS or the social safety net and instead think the market can solve every issue. In short, they believe the market is God. And when Truss moved into number 10, that ideology became government policy. Policy like the disastrous mini-budget that crashed the pound, raised mortgage repayments and dramatically hiked the cost of government borrowing, making most of us poorer and necessitating a series of humiliating government U-turns. Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng are very familiar with this black door. One leading Conservative commentator, Tim Montgomery, has even said the PM and her short-lived Chancellor were incubated by one of the lobbying groups clustered around this building. So, what organisations are we talking about? Well, they often have innocuous-sounding names that cloak their fundamentalist agendas. For starters, there's the Taxpayers Alliance and the Global Warming Policy Foundation. Next door is the Centre for Policy Studies, and just around the corner from here are the Adam Smith Institute and the Institute of Economic Affairs. The Tufton Street network comprises a tiny group of people relative to the rest of us, but aided by secretive donations, they exercise a reach and influence that far outweighs their numbers, and one of them has just become Prime Minister. When she entered number 10, she opened the door to an army of Tufton Street ideologues. She made this guy her chief economic advisor. He's Matthew Sinclair, and he's the former head of the Taxpayers Alliance, based here. After delivering his mini-budget, Kwarteng was pictured celebrating with him. Truss's interim press secretary, Alex Wilde, was research director at the Taxpayers Alliance. Her health advisor, Caroline Elson, was senior researcher at the Centre for Policy Studies. Truss made this woman her senior special advisor. She's Ruth Porter, former communications director at the Institute of Economic Affairs. While this guy, Julian Jessup, is one of her main advisors on the economy. He's also a fellow at the Institute of Economic Affairs. In fact, every time Truss has got a new government job, she's recruited her advisors from the Tufton Street network. It's just that this time her new job is being Prime Minister. According to the head of the Institute of Economic Affairs, Truss has spoken at more of its events than any other politician over the past 12 years. 2 of Truss's meetings with the organisation were deleted from the official record, then reinstated after the deletions caused a scandal. In 2011, Truss was the supposed founder of a Conservative Party organisation called the Free Enterprise Group. The organisation's webpage was registered by Ruth Porter, who at the time worked for the IEA. The IEA supplied Truss's group with media briefings and organised events for her. 12 members of the current cabinet, including several of its most senior figures, belong to that group. Today, if you try to open its webpage, you're redirected to something called the Free Market Forum, which calls itself a project of the Institute of Economic Affairs. That same year, 2011, Truss teamed up with 4 MPs from her IEA-affiliated Free Enterprise Group, including Kwarteng, to write a book called Britannia Unchained. In it, they said the British are among the worst idlers in the world, and laid out an ideology of tax cuts for the wealthy, gutted workers' rights, and funding cuts for public services. In other words, the Tufton Street agenda. What else do the people in and around this building believe in? In February of this year, King's College London hosted a debate on the motion, should the NHS be privatised? Speaking in favour of the motion was Christian Niemitz from the Institute of Economic Affairs. The Global Warming Policy Foundation, based here, has been described as the UK's most prominent source of climate change denial. The group has previously been found to have spread misinformation about the science of global warming. Truss's pledge to end the ban on fracking was lobbied for by the Adam Smith Institute, where her longest-serving special advisor previously worked. Then we get to Kwasi Kwarteng's recent mini-budget. The policies he announced were vastly more beneficial to the richest in society than any other group. He handed £1 billion a year to just 2,500 multi-millionaires. From the cut in corporation tax to the cut in the highest rate of income tax, it was a budget that could have been written in this building. In fact, it kind of was. Because here's how the Tufton Street network reacted. The Taxpayers Alliance boasted that multiple measures in the mini-budget were policy wins for them, including the abolition of the 45p tax rate. The Centre for Policy Studies boasted that they bagged 7 campaign wins with Kwarteng's budget. The Adam Smith Institute said so many of Kwarteng's proposals were things they'd advocated for. While the head of the Institute of Economic Affairs responded to the claim that Truss was incubated there and that Britain was now the IEA's laboratory by posting a self-important sunglasses emoji. The mini-budget was, by their own admission, very much the work of these campaign groups, which begs the question, who funds these groups? In the main, we don't know, and they won't tell us. We do know the IEA has received donations from BP and ExxonMobil and, along with the Adam Smith Institute and the Centre for Policy Studies, from the tobacco industry. The IEA and the Adam Smith Institute have also received millions of dollars from American groups that also funded climate change denial. But in general, we simply don't know who paid for the campaign to have the British government adopt a form of fundamentalist extreme free market ideology. And of course, it all happened without the inconvenience of asking the voters if they had an opinion on all this. Truss was elected by just 0.1% of the British public, those Conservative Party members who supported her. When one journalist asked if Liz Truss has handed power over to these so-called think tanks, he received a one-word reply from the head of public policy at the Institute of Economic Affairs. That word was yes. For decades, these groups have been claiming that they have all the answers, that if only we'd listen to them and do what they want, then they could perform an economic miracle. When Liz Truss took power, so did they, and it took them just 3 weeks to crash the economy and destroy a Conservative Prime Minister.